All right, show of hands. Who is thriving right now? Who's thriving? Introverts like my husband, who don't have to make up excuses to not go to a party for at least a year, right?
Amen.
Amen. And people who don't need an eyebrow wax once a month. They're really having their moment. Sometimes you all tell me that you really miss my bangs, but I think that the choice to grow them out was one of the most prophetic moments of my ministry, because I've seen some of the bang trims on the internet. Raise your hand again. Who's just barely surviving? Raise your hands. Maybe the person who's just barely surviving is the one who's asking for a show of hands in an empty room. Maybe those of us who feel like they're speaking into the abyss are having the hardest time of all. We need love like we need food and water, and love is fleshy. So no one maybe is thriving right now. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I interpret that to mean love is what lights the path forward. If I can manage to follow the good, I will have all that I need. It feels like we're not thriving because it feels like we don't have all we need if we don't have love. The work of love is essential work. Our operations chair, Doug, reflects to me that I always have trouble prioritizing what's essential, especially when it comes to the church budget. The problem with me, he says, is that I think it's all essential. I like to think that's my theology of abundance rearing its beautiful head, but I think it's also because I cannot unlink one thing with all the rest of the things without it unraveling. It's all essential because it leads us on right paths for love's name. I don't like picking and choosing, and God doesn't either, so why should I? So when Charlie Baker announced that non-essential workplaces would need to shut down or employees had to work from home, the worship team wondered anxiously if we would be allowed to continue this Facebook Live worship broadcast from our sanctuary. Different states had different guidance for shutting down non-essential business. Different states called different things essential and non-essential. Many of my colleagues broadcast worship from their living rooms because it is safer than gathering even a skeleton crew. Leadership is so fraught right now. Every decision is made in the dark. Every decision is life or death, or so it feels. Perhaps stubbornly and not without hubris, we wanted to stay here in the sanctuary with strict practices for keeping our team safe. We had already set up a sound stage on top of the pews. Linda Davis is standing on it right now. You can't see her, but she is standing on the pews right now. We have better equipment in here. Now we even have a mixer that John Guild is over here mixing the sound for. Everybody is so out of their comfort zone. But we worked at this. And we're still having sound issues right now? Feed issues again. Sorry, everyone. Nothing's perfect. Mostly, though, we wanted to remind you of this holy place that we share. The church is not the building, it's the people. We get that, and yet this sanctuary is your home. We wanted you to know it was still here to come home to. In our reading from Acts, Luke says this of the apostles: day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. The goodwill of all the people that have worshiped here cannot be contained by these four walls. We can be alone, breaking bread, breaking our communion bread in our homes because we have once gathered here together. The building is not essential, but love is. The work of love is essential work. Anyway, Linda sent me a text with a picture from the evening news, 7 weeks ago, probably. How long have we been doing this? 8 weeks, maybe? Yeah. So maybe 7 weeks ago, declaring that small worship teams for live streaming are considered an essential service. And I was relieved, and I was also a little embarrassed. The fact that I was deemed essential in the Commonwealth simply to continue my newfound televangelism career seemed a little bit like a stretch. After all, this worship team is a wonderful group of humans, but we know nothing about how to perform life-saving surgeries or keeping people comfortable while we adjust their medication, and we don't have shelves lined with groceries or beds and showers for those who find themselves without a home. It feels a little bit like the purpose we serve in a global pandemic is akin to the string quartet playing Nearer My God to Thee on the Titanic as the ship slowly sunk into the ocean. Still, we know this: love is essential work, like food or water. The work of love is essential. When I worked as a chaplain intern in the hospital, I was always the least essential person in the room. I couldn't diagnose or prognosticate. I couldn't lift someone out of bed to help them to the bathroom. I couldn't prescribe medication or give detailed choices to families about what their next steps were. The only thing I could do was listen, hold a hand, grab some water for the family, pray in fumbling language with someone who usually didn't even share the same religious tradition I did. I truly believe that faith saves lives, but I also know from hard-won experience that even the best worded, most earnest prayers do not stop people from dying. Eventually, neither do the best doctors either. It was in the moment when the patients and families heard there is nothing more we can do that I was finally deemed essential. I could sit with families as they heard that news. I could bear witness to their pain. I could make it so they weren't alone. I could ask questions about life's regrets and triumphs and then listen to the answers. I could help redefine hope. I could recite ancient words that make people breathe more deeply. Like, even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The work of love is essential work. There are different translations of the 23rd Psalm in English Bibles. Some say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Some say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I have all I need." In Hebrew, want and need are synonymous. In English, we want to distinguish between those two words. Needs are essential, wants are inessential, right? We say to children, "You do not need that cookie, you just want it." Now that we are walking together in the valley of the shadow of death with the entire world, many people, from the scientific community to the economists to the internet comment section warriors, have gotten more clear on what is a want and what is a need. And there's a lot of judgment out there about distinguishing between the two. I appreciate that clarity that everyone has suddenly found, but it hasn't led to my own clarity. The pyramid of needs is only somewhat helpful. Food and water, safety and health are on the bottom of the pyramid, so they are deemed essential, right? Hospitals and grocery stores, police and fire, essential. After that, it gets muddier, because what feeds us and keeps us safe is much more complex. It's not just police officers, EMTs, and fire departments who keep us safe. It is not just hospitals and doctors and nurses who keep us healthy. It is not just grocery stores that keep us fed. We can stay home to minimize coronavirus death, but we know that we are accelerating other deaths, both psychic and physical, from loneliness, suicide, poverty, hunger, domestic violence and child abuse, untreated illness and mental illness, alcoholism and other addictions, the list goes on, right? Choose to stay home from one another, more people will live and still more will die. Choose to gather in community, more people will live and still more will die. It's like Sophie's choice. So experts make our what's essential lists for us, and the lists leave us without all we need. Because all we need is love. They tell us that the nuclear family is essential and that the chosen family and extended family are non-essential. They tell us that education is essential and that school is not essential. They tell us that humanity is essential, but that touching other humans is not essential. They tell us that God is essential and that gathering in groups to know God's presence is not essential. And here's what I'm learning during this time of physical distancing. It's all essential, because love is essential work. Sometimes folks on the internet who have disdain for religious institutions say this, and I admit that some of my colleagues, a very small amount of my colleagues, have been behaving badly, right, and gathering their churches together and maybe causing more death. But the disdain for religious institutions often say things like, you don't need to go to church, you want to, right? Your faith, if you ever had any at all, should be contained in your heart. Just stay home. You still have your faith. And while I agree with them that it's the best way to follow Jesus right now is to stay home, a lump rises up in my throat when I hear people talk about faith this way. Because my religion is fleshy. It needs flesh and blood community in order to thrive. So there is something missing right now, and it is okay to say that. We are the hands and feet and hearts and voices of God, not the internet comment section of God. We need one another to carry out love's mission on earth. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. And so we have learned so much during this time of isolation about how to be the church. And there are so many practices that we hope to keep. And when we are not gathered, we are not the same. We crave beauty. We are starving for touch. We don't have all we need when we don't have each other. The work of love is still essential work. We long to put our skin back in the game. So here's an opportunity. I'm pleased to tell you that a group from the Saturday Lunches team and the Outreach Ministry Leadership Team is partnering with David Chandler over at Meadowbrook Orchards in Sterling to provide free hot meals for our community once a week. The team discovered that there are over 100 children in Sterling eligible for free and reduced lunches that are not receiving their free lunches offered at Wachusett and Holden. They discovered that the unemployment rate is growing in town and that families and elders are worried about putting food on their tables. They know that having friendly human connection is what is missed the most about the Saturday lunch. So they plan to include messages of hope and a pamphlet with resources in each of the boxes. The volunteers will be there with appropriate PPE to give out the food. They will wear buttons with their faces on them so you can see our smiling faces underneath our masks. Volunteers will help prep food at Dave's farm and finish food at our kitchen here, and then volunteers will hand out food. There are so many opportunities to show up in the flesh. So, beloved, continue to break bread at home and eat your food with glad and generous hearts, praising God. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other. We are still more than the sum of our parts, even apart. And we can still do together what we could never do alone. Remember that the work of love is essential work. Figure out what that work looks like to you right now and do it. My colleague Wayne Arneson writes, "Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone." Amen.